Brothers and sisters across this amazing country, thank you so much for tuning in, and we have something special for you guys today. This is, of course, The Second Legacy. I am Braden, the guy opposite or somewhere on the screen. His name is Tim, and we have a special guest today. We're going to dive in to what actually happens when the brutal realities of gun control fail miserably. We've got a first-hand experience, and I cannot wait to bring it to you. So, without too much more of an introduction, wasting it on my beautiful face, make sure you hit that like, subscribe, and share button, and let's get over to Tim. Let's take it away, my man.
Well, I want to welcome Carl. Well, you're a smart-ass, Carl, I think is what you go by on Twitter. But I've been following Carl for quite some time, and he's a Second Amendment advocate. He really gives the anti-gunners a hard time, and it's really entertaining to watch, so I highly recommend you guys swing by and check out his Twitter. We'll put a link in the video description below so you can check him out. But he made a post recently that really caused me to reach out to him and invite him onto the show because he told a story that I think is really important that Americans hear. And that's a story of failed gun control, a transition into becoming a Second Amendment advocate, and what drove that. And he has just a really interesting background and stuff like that. So, Carl, thank you, man, for coming on the show. It means so much that you took time out of your day to do this.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Awesome, man. So the tweet I'm talking about, and I'm going to paraphrase, but basically he posted this really lengthy tweet. You went way past the 280 characters, and it was a great read. Oh. And basically he talked about how you were, not really in the 2A movement. You weren't pro-gun. You weren't actively anti-gun. But then, your peers, family, and friends and stuff like that kind of, you fit in with their political worldview. And then a traumatic event took place. And that event was a home invasion where you were ultimately shot and wounded. And that traumatic event kind of caused you to have a metamorphosis in terms of how you viewed the Second Amendment, how you viewed politics in general. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened there?
So in 2009, I was just chilling at home. It was my day off. Some guy, I guess, he picked out my house out of many. He broke in through my sliding glass door. I came from my room. I guess he thought somebody wasn't home. When I saw him, he saw me. I turned around and ran to the room. I was actually going to get my cell phone to call 911. I guess he thought I was going to get a weapon, and he shot me before I can get to the room. So he shot me in my back. I fell to the floor. I was bleeding. I was able to manage to call 911, and they got there fairly quickly and rushed me to the hospital before I bled out. So I spent about 9 months in the hospital and rehabbing my injury. Luckily, he missed my kidney, so I wasn't severely injured, but I was injured nonetheless. After that, I looked into getting a gun to protect against things like that. In Florida, we have the castle doctrine, so we're able to defend our homes against any home invader. I researched that. I researched the fact that what would be the perfect type of gun to get. Most experts were saying a shotgun. The shotgun would be the best. I ended up, I didn't really have the gun knowledge that I have now. I ended up going to Walmart and buying a field model Maverick 88. It was better than nothing. I didn't have a lot of money at the time. So I ended up buying that. After getting the gun, the shotgun, a lot of my friends and family kind of turned on me. And they was like, well, you're letting, the gun lobby win.
Had nothing to do with being shot. It was the gun lobby.
No, it's the gun lobby.
It was the gun lobby. It was like, the guy who shot me, he got his gun through a straw purchase. So his girlfriend actually purchased the gun for him. And he ended up actually robbing 2 other people before he got to me. So, he ended up robbing 2 people on the street. but he decided to invade my home. So this was around like, the holiday season. So it was like November time when he shot me. So he probably saw a lot of the stuff that was put out. Like I bought like a new TV and things like that for Christmas, and I put the box out. So he probably thought I was a easy mark because of things like that.
Right.
So after he was arrested, he got about 25 years. His girlfriend got about 5 years. So even though she, helped her boyfriend get a gun that he was not supposed to have, she ended up only getting 5 years. So, justice.
You know what's weird about that is if you drive a getaway car for a bank robbery and you're sitting in the car, you're not even in the bank, and the person that goes in the bank to actually do the robbing shoots and kills somebody, everybody gets charged with murder. So how does this woman walk on making an illegal purchase for her criminal boyfriend that ultimately uses the gun to put himself in prison for 25 years for shooting you in the back, and then she walks with 5 years? This does not, in my mind, that light of a sentence, which she'll probably get out with good behavior or whatever they do. She might just do a couple of years. I hope that's not the case. I don't know if she's still in prison or not. You said this happened in 2009.
She's out. She's out.
So there you go. All right. So, well, I mean, she could be out anyway if she did the 5 years by now, but it just doesn't seem that they're doing anything to really dissuade people from making these straw purchases for criminals that cannot own these legally. So once again, the laws that they've put into place, they don't enforce, they don't work, but when they do use them, they don't even enforce them, it seems. It's just crazy to me.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
She had no priors and she had a child. So she was supposed to get 10 is what the prosecutors was telling me. But she only got 5 because they took mercy on her because she had a child.
I get it.
And because, she had no prior, she had no run-ins with the law. So, that was her. So she got 5 years in prison, and I think the rest was probation, like another 5 years of probation.
It's probably because she's the gun lobby. It's she is the gun lobby. It's her fault.
Her last name's not Biden by chance, is it? Just kidding. Anyway. I had to
That's a different type of felony, Tim. That's a different kind of felony. Stick with the program.
I talked about that heavy on Twitter, and it was, one of the things that I think people on the anti-gun side don't realize is that small crimes like that could lead to big tragedies, I believe that it's alleged that he tried to get rid of the gun some way, throwing it in the trash, or like, what if somebody else found that and shot themselves or shot someone else?
Well, it's actually the left is fully aware of that concept because I believe it was Giuliani who did the broken windows policing, where it continually just cycles down the path of criminality, and they hate it. They don't like that. They don't like that because what it does is it implies that you can't control people for or you can only control people for their actions. You can't control people for the inanimate objects that they that they have or they take or they use. The big thing here is if you break a window, if you jump the turnstiles, okay, well, that's a slippery slope. That's the entire concept.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in this scenario. If you have somebody who has a propensity for violence, they pick up a firearm and they use that in a violent crime. It's not the fact that the gun was magically the influence that made them do something. It was the entire history and background. It's the individual. It's not the gun lobby. It's not the gun. It's not the surrounding economic environment that made them do it. No, they just made a choice and it was the wrong one.
Yeah.
I have
that simple.
One of the things that you brought up, and I wanted to get your input on was, your not only did your family, friends, and other peers take issue with you buying firearms and going out shooting them. I know that you've posted some pictures of you with your children with firearms. Of course, they've criticized you for that.
Whoa, not my children. Those are actually people. There's a group that I'm in.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I post. What I try to do is I try to promote gun ownership amongst Black people because there's this idea that if Black people start to, carry firearms or have AR-15s and things like that, that white conservatives will pass gun control tomorrow. Like, that's a talking point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
So what
Just going with this, by the way.
I do is I'll try to promote black, like, just basically showcase black gun ownership to get them to understand that, hey, we carry guns too. That's why I posted a tweet yesterday saying, like, look at the magical Negro shooting a gun, because they think that we don't exist. Like, we're in
That was a funny one. I saw that one.
So, that's what I do. As I don't have any kids, so when I do have kids, that'll be something that me and my wife do, is we are going to teach our child gun safety, because I have a lot of guns, and I have guns everywhere.
Absolutely.
So
and see, the left just loves attacking gun owners for doing that. Like, all my children were shooting at 5 years old, right? I have a little cricket rifle, single shot 22 with iron sights, and that's where we start. And then it progresses as they show more and more interest as they age. But one thing you'll notice in my house, I don't do this, but I could. I can take my carry gun off, unload it, lay it on the kitchen table, and walk away from it, and not one of my 3 kids would even think of touching it. If anything, they'd say, hey, Dad, your gun's on the table. Should it be there? They're not going to touch it. There's no curiosity there. They know that any time they can come to me and say, Dad, can we go shoot? And we'll go out and shoot, right? So taking that curiosity away, and they all know how to safely handle them if they're forced to. They know how to unload them. They know not to touch trigger. And if you're in a house with firearms, it is the only responsible thing to do is to teach your children about them, how to unload them, what to do if they encounter one. And the left would take that away from us. They say, well, look at this. They post pictures of kids with guns, like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. Family photos that people will post with themselves with firearms. And they talk about how evil and bad that is. And look what they're indoctrinating their kids. They don't care about safety. They always say, if we can just save one life, and it's all about the kids and saving children. But then they go on rants like that. It's all about, I got into an argument yesterday on Twitter with an anti-gunner, and I started off being civil with the anti-gunner. I sent you, Braden, what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know. I enjoyed this thread.
And basically I said, look, it wasn't the gun. This anti-gunner made a post saying that the gun killed this child in Texas in a shooting. And I said, it wasn't the gun. And once again, you're not talking about the criminal and what caused the criminal to do this. You just want to put this blame on an inanimate object. This person comes back with, F you and F your rights, and you don't have a right. And I made a post saying, this person's just parroting the same stuff. They always blame the gun. They never talk about what caused the tragedy or what inspired the criminal to carry this horrific act out. They just keep going back to the same well of blaming the inanimate object, and they always parrot the same line, it's the guns. And then I posted that, and within minutes, because they didn't know I'd posted this on my own Twitter feed, they responded to my response saying exactly that. I called it. They said, it's the gun, stupid, and went back to attacking the firearm, saying it was the gun was designed to do this. The gun did this. The gun shreds their bodies, and it's the gun, stupid. I'm like, right on cue. On cue.
They're very predictable in their arguments. I've been on Twitter advocating for gun rights since about 2012, and I've heard it all. They repeat the same talking points that they heard from, left-wing media or their favorite politicians and things like that. I call them out on it. I can even predict their argument well before they even make it. So when even if I'm starting out civil with a anti-gunner, they tend to fall into an emotional argument. Like,
every time.
I had posted a picture of hangings back in like the early 1900s, right? And I said, the reason for me owning an AR-15 is for stuff like this, violence, not towards any particular people, but violence. And the person who saw this picture, instead of just saying, hey, I disagree with it and keep scrolling, they actually made a joke about my penis. And I'm like, okay.
So typical.
you saw
you have a small member, Carl.
yeah, like you saw a traumatic picture, and me stating my case for owning a rifle, and because you don't like that rifle, you proceeded to make the same joke that 7 million people make all the time to me on Twitter about my penis, and I'm like, okay, so you're not really thinking for yourself. No. You're thinking along the lines of what everybody else has said to you about gun owners, is that they have small and they're compensating for something or some crap like that. And I'm like, when it comes down to the arguments of anti-gunners and pro-gun rights people, the pro-gun rights people argue based off of logic and experience, where these anti-gunners are just saying the same stuff that they've heard from left-wing media or, people like Joe Biden or gun control organizations. And I just wanted to touch on something that you said, Tim. There is no gun control organization that sponsors gun safety. It's all about stopping someone from owning a gun. The one thing I hear all the time is that there's too many guns on the streets. There's too many people have guns. That's why we have all this gun violence. Okay, so where's your gun rights? Where's your gun safety organization? I don't see anybody on the anti-gun side that has a organization in these crime-ridden neighborhoods that is teaching people how to properly use a gun.
Well, that's not common sense safety, Carl. Come on. I mean, it's about safety organization. It just so happens that their definition of safety means no guns. But you just don't understand. You just don't understand because you don't know. And you've been corrupted by the gun lobby. Have I mentioned gun lobby? It's the gun lobby.
Oh, according to them, I'm a paid gun rights spokesman for the NRA, which I've never been contacted by the NRA. So
how's that NRA money? How's that NRA money?
Everybody thinks I'm like Colin Noir or something like that. Like I've been working in conjunction with the NRA to spread gun rights, and like Colin Noir is a great YouTuber and great gun rights advocate, but I never worked for the NRA or any gun rights organization. What I do is because I'm passionate about it. I'm a gun owner. I'm a gun violence victim, so it's one of those things where I don't understand why people think that, but I can understand why people think that at the same time.
One thing I've noticed about the anti-gunners and far left politics in general, it seems like they embrace, all sorts of communities. Like they claim to be all loving and they're not racist and all this other stuff. But that's until somebody like a black person buys a gun and then says, I'm voting for Trump or I'm conservative or whatever. Then all of a sudden they commence with the racial attacks.
Yeah.
Look at what they're doing to Clarence Thomas. I mean, they will do horrible and say horrible things. And I've seen a little bit of that in some of your responses to other people on Twitter. I think it was you that somebody had posted a picture of a black person with a firearm and asked if that offended you or scared you or whatever. Yeah. And you said, dude, I'm a black person. It's like they always go to this racial card and they always misuse it. And they claim the moral high ground when in reality, in my experience, they're the racists. And somehow we get the label in the 2A community of being a bunch of old white curmudgeon racists. And you can speak to this, but in my view of my white privilege, I see an all-encompassing community that I absolutely love. When I go to the firing range, I don't see people going, oh, don't talk to that person. They're Asian. Don't hang out with that person. They're a black person. Don't talk to that person because they don't quite look like me. Everybody's hanging out, sharing ammunition, having a good time, doing whatever. And everybody's just left scratching their heads when we see ourselves being accused of being these horrible racists that want to deny minorities access to firearms. And we're the ones out there saying everybody in America has a right to be armed and they need to be armed.
It's because a lot of these people sit here and watch left-leaning media on social media and be in their own little circle, and they're being told the pro-gun people, they're completely white boys, they're racist, they hate women, they're misogynists, they hate the LGBTQ community, they don't want gays to have guns and all this other bull crap. Me being on Twitter, the most racism I've ever gotten is from the anti-gun left.
I believe that.
I'm either not black, so when I prove that I'm black, well, you're uncle, them white boys don't care nothing about you, and things like that. If you take a look at my Twitter account, 98% of the people that follow me are white conservatives. White men.
Guilty as charged. And I'm a horrible person for it. I'm only doing it because I'm racist, Carl.
I mean, yeah, that's the problem.
I have at this time about 35,000 followers that's following me, and like I said, 98% of them are white and conservative, and the comments that I get is nothing but love. When I went down because I had very low blood sugar, I'm diabetic. I went to the hospital. Told people that, hey, I'm in a hospital, I may not be tweeting as much, and I've got a flood of love from these same people that they claim are racist and don't care about me. So when it comes down to it, these people don't think for themselves. I was watching while I was on a cruise, we had nothing but MSNBC on the TV. So I'm just sitting there watching. That's
not a vacation, Carl. That's not a vacation.
No, but at night when there was nothing going on and I had nothing to watch, and I watched all of my movies that I had on my computer. It was a 7-day cruise, so I ended up watching Joy Reid just to see what she was saying.
Oh, boy.
Oh, man.
This was at the time that Bruin had just got announced, and the decision just got announced. And she basically was saying that it's open season on black people, that because of this law, we're going to have more shootings of black people that is unjustified and things like that. And then lo and behold, that didn't happen.
Shocking.
So a lot of people on the left seem to think that white people only have guns to shoot black people. And, it's not the fact that everyone, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, are just having guns, carrying guns because they don't want to be the victim of a crime. Being a victim of a crime is not something that, anyone wants to experience.
Yeah.
So when they see that gun rights are being expanded, it's always a racial issue. They always think of it as a racial issue, and that, black, white, not black, white, but white people are only looking to kill people because y'all the only ones that own guns, and that we are, just waiting victims or something like that. I don't know what it is. I don't think in that mindset anymore, so I can't figure out why I think that.
So let me ask you a direct question about the time when you were in that mindset, because this is something that I'm curious. That's a really great story, and the way you kind of come to the point where you're at's awesome. But the question that I would have around that is, really, you're talking about an awakening to a reality is really what you're talking about. You're talking about the difference between waiting and being a victim and having someone come and help you, or taking that self-defense yourself. That's really where it boils down all the way. Now, everything that reacts from that's a different reaction. But what you're really describing is the fact that you're getting into your own self-preservation. So the big question that I have was, Was it the moment when you felt that sting of being the victim that was the switch in your brain? Or was it the moment when you embraced your Second Amendment and you bought your first gun and you started researching and you started experiencing that culture? Because those are two very, very different inflection points. Mm-hmm. Is it the before the purchase or after the purchase where it basically became a part of your move going forward? That's really what I'd like to know.
So it was after the purchase. It was when I started doing my research. So one of the things that I did as part of my research, I watched a lot of YouTube. Like I used to watch Tim. I watched a lot of other YouTubers, and their arguments for the Second Amendment sound very logical, while on the other side of it, it sounds very emotional. People like Tim and other people on YouTube will pull out stats, and I will go look up those stats because I don't just take anybody at their word. I want to look it up myself. So I will go look it up, and they'll be telling the truth. Then I'll look up what the anti-gunners are saying. Like, for instance, they would say things like you're more likely to shoot yourself or someone else in your home than you are to shoot a burglar. Well, nobody else was in my home when I got shot. The burglar shot, and I didn't have a gun. So, I look at that, well, what they're saying, and I would, hey, what are they really saying here? Well, if a person has training, is proficient with their firearm, knows what to do in a home invasion situation or like active shooter situation, you're more than likely to kill the bad guy before they're killed. They know what shot placement is. They know, when to shoot and when not to shoot, what is concealment, what is cover, things like that, things you learn in the self-defense class. So for me, it was just doing the research, listening to good arguments on YouTube, and actually listening to Second Amendment scholars who, studied the Second Amendment, know, what the founders was thinking at that time when they wrote the Second Amendment and things like that. Most of the one argument I used to hear was that the Second Amendment was built for slavery.
Right.
That's
the newest one.
That is the dumbest argument I've ever heard around the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment was built for the security of a free state and give people the right to keep and bear arms. So security of a free state could have meant anything: the slave uprising, Native American attack, foreign invasion, things like that. Security of a free state encompasses everything. So, security of a free state could be what happened in Athens, where the soldiers returning from World War II. Yep.
It was.
Yeah. Took on the police department because they was corrupt. Mm-hmm. And so, like, if I have a corrupt police department down here and they're, I don't know, doing what they was doing in 2020 up in New Jersey, the people have the right to resist that.
For those watching aren't familiar with the Battle of Athens, Google that, Battle of Athens, and you can read about what Carl's talking about. And this is something that is not taught in school, but should be. And the reason they don't teach it is because it's an example of the Second Amendment doing precisely what it was intended to do. We had rampant corruption in local government. They were basically stealing an election, and the people had enough, and they went into the local National Guard armory, armed themselves, and a standoff ensued. And in the end, the citizens prevailed, and the corrupt city officials, found themselves in trouble. But anyway, so please take a look at that, because that is a very critical piece of American history that supports the entire purpose of the Second Amendment. I'm sorry to interrupt, man.
Mm-hmm. No, and so when people on the anti-gun side say things like, "Oh, well, the Second Amendment is irrelevant," you can't take on the United States Army or military or things like that, I point to the Battle of Athens, because, it doesn't mean that we have to take on the federal government. Sometimes it's, on a smaller scale. You have a situation where local government could be corrupt. Mm-hmm. And what are you going to do, if something does happen where our country does turn tyrannical? It's going to happen at the local level first. It's not, they're thinking on a more grander scale. Well, I'm thinking like, okay, what if my local police department supports that tyrannical government and they're rounding people up? What am I going to do?
Well,
how am I going to protect my family?
Take a look at what happened during the pandemic. The federal government was issuing all these mandates and CDC was doing all this stuff, but it wasn't the federal government going into the states enforcing these mandates. It was the local authorities doing it. Mm-hmm. And so, a friend of mine who's now retired but was a police officer at a local department, we went to breakfast one morning and he said something to me that was very profound. And this is a strong Second Amendment guy. I mean, you could not ask for a more libertarian-minded person. And, he said to me, he's like, Tim, what really stinks is that the community I love looks at me as the enemy. And when things go sideways, they're going to target me and my family because they see me as the enforcer, even though I won't take that side. Mm-hmm. And it's the truth, because it is the local police in many of these jurisdictions, and especially in the sheriff's department, where they have a decision to make, and that is uphold the Constitution or violate people's rights. And we saw a lot of them violate people's rights in the last few years. Yeah. And so, yes, but also keep in mind that even at the federal level, even if, God forbid, that we got into a war with the federal government, the people versus the federal government, take a look at what happened in the last 20 years of war when we went up against an enemy for 20 years that had no combined arms, had no air power, had rudimentary unencrypted radios to communicate with, fighting with small arms only. They frustrated our military, the most powerful military in the world, for 20 years. Now, you can't call necessarily what they achieved a victory, but, they certainly inflicted plenty of damage on us, both financially and the cost of lives and wounded and casualties, and just the amazing amount of just human suffering that transpired over those 20 years. And so to say that the people can't stand up to a government is absolutely asinine. One. Joe Biden goes out there and says, well, you don't have F-16s. Shut up, Joe. Go eat some ice cream.
We don't need F-16s.
I'm talking about nuking American citizens.
What the problem is that people don't think about is that we have no less of enemies that would not care to see the United States government fall. So if the United States government turned tyrannical, we will have support from other countries in that war. So if it's the U.S. citizens versus the government, and we can somehow show how the government is killing citizens indiscriminately with high-tech weapons and things like that, and we're just fighting back, just like the war in Ukraine between Ukraine and Russia, they're getting support from other countries. I believe that we will too.
So that's just like France in our founding. France did the same thing against the British. And by the way, this is a totally hypothetical scenario, you two.
Yeah, we're just talking total hypothetical, and we're talking about leftist politicians bringing this up, not us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're the ones accusing us of all this stuff, and it's like, anyway, go ahead.
we live peaceful. I live in a garden peacefully, but that doesn't mean that I haven't forgotten how to be a warrior. So
did you just drop a samurai quote?
Yep.
It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Did you?
Exactly.
Okay, Carl, I see you.
So for me, it's like I live peacefully. I'm not bothering anybody. I embrace my freedom and my liberty. So it's like one of those things that if you come to my door expecting war, I am going to give it to you. I'm not going to shy away from it. I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to surrender. I am not going to live on my knees. I will die on my feet before I let you infringe on my liberty. So for me, when I hear anti-gunners bringing up, oh, well, you can't take on the U.S. military, my thing is, it's not, winning. It's making it so costly, making it causing so much destruction that they don't want, that they just back down. Like they just leave. So,
well, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say something real quick. One thing I found really funny recently on Twitter is you'll see people saying, ban the guns and I'll volunteer to go around door to door and collect them. And then you look at the person making the post and they're a Canadian or they live in the European Union somewhere. It's like, you come on over and try that. But
Yeah, you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know. So let me tie back one thing because you did something, it was so solid what you just said about 5 minutes ago. When we were talking about what made the choice or what made that moment cemented for you, whether it was the victimization point or the gun purchase point, you said something in there which is the crux of the problem for the entire conversation that we're having, to be honest. The reason that you got so much heat so quickly was because the second that you bought that gun, okay, that can be chalked up as that's a reaction purchase. That's just something you're reacting to a stimuli that scared you. But the part that gets them up in arms, so to speak, is when you take that next step of actually researching what the arguments are, what you actually start researching the products, when you actually start researching the laws and the history. The second that you open that door, they've lost you forever.
Yeah,
they have. There is not a single person who has a basic understanding of civil rights, of history, of understanding of any kind of important topic of our nation and foundation of our nation that will not look at everything that is there on the table when it's actually revealed and say, oh, you're right, the anti-gunners are correct. It's just simply not the case, which is why you have more minorities bought guns than ever before in the last 2 years. Yep. There are more single women. There are more minorities. Like I said, there's all sorts of stripes of people that are buying guns at unprecedented levels.
The gay community.
And the second that they do that, yep. The second that they open that door, they've lost them forever, and that's one less bucket that they can put against you. That's why they resist so hard the second that you even open the door.
Oh yeah, like living near Orlando, we had Pulse, we had that right. And the LGBTQ community, at least people that I know, I started seeing more people from that community show up at the range because they don't want to be victims of the hate that they received. So I, at my local gun shop where I get most of my guns from, I started seeing more of them come in, more minorities after 2020 started coming in and buying guns and learning the gun laws and things like that. I even teach classes at that gun shop, help teach classes. I don't do it myself, but help teach classes and telling them about the history and then directing them to our state statute so they can learn everything, what is legal, where you can and can't carry and things like that. I always thought guns, the AR-15 or other guns like this, it was just something that, mass shooters pick up to go kill a bunch of people. And how you explained it, I never thought about it like that because I would explain it like, hey, it's an easy gun to shoot. It's highly customizable. It shoots a very intermediate round. It's not like something that, your wife or your grandmother couldn't control. So when they keep an open mind or an illogical mind, they start to see our arguments on why we own these things.
Yeah, it's true. It's like you said at the beginning of the broadcast. We do see that they have illogical, emotionally based arguments, and when they do, on the rare occasion where they do cite statistics, those statistics come from compromised sources. And then they're quickly debunked, and then they just move on back to emotional attacks and things like that. Now, one thing I've noticed about your posts on Twitter is you maintain a really level head, and that's commendable. many times, you'll lose that audience that you're courting of people that are watching this debate if you go too far off into the personal attacks, right? And so it's really good to have a voice like yours out there because you dispel and debunk so many of the untruths that these anti-gunners will try to push out there through their media outlets. And that's why they find you so offensive and why they're so brutal to you online is because you shred their arguments just by existing and exposing them on Twitter. And they can't stand that. And that's why you get the racial attacks and why you get all this other stuff. And it's predictable, but it's disgusting at the same time. And we're running up against the clock here, Carl, but I'd love to have you back again to continue the discussion. But
no problem. I would love to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you come on the show, tell the story of how you became a 2A advocate. I'm sorry that you had to go through that awful experience. Thank God you survived. Thank God for your wife and your family and friends that you survived that attack to come to evolve. Use that event to evolve into the person you are today. That's out there advocating for all Americans' rights and their right to self-preservation, their right to self-defense. I got a chill when you said you're moving for your phone to call 911 and were shot in the back. That's why I wear a handgun. If I'm awake, I have a gun on. At home, I don't care where I'm at. Because when that door gets kicked open, I don't want to have to run to my bedroom for a shotgun. I need to be able to solve that problem quickly. And,
I have my gun right next to me right now. So it's one of those things that
I'm surrounded.
People don't understand. Like, I carry in my house. Yeah. So
you have to. You always have to be prepared. But again, Carl, thank you so much for coming on, guys. If you want to check out his Twitter, I highly recommend you do that. We will put a link in the video description below. Carl, again, we'd love to have you back on a future episode. If you'd like to be part of our call-in show, you can do that. Come right here on the show, chat with us, talk about pro-gun topics, talk about take an anti-gun position. We'd love to debate you. There will be a link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and we'll talk to you guys soon.